Hey there, how's it going everybody? In this video, I'm going to walk through how I personally handle multiple projects, virtual environments, and environment variables. Now, when you're working on multiple projects at once, it's easy to get your packages and dependencies mixed up, and also it's hard to keep track of virtual environments, and also you might have environment variables that are overriding each other and things like that. So in this video, I'll show you how I keep all of these separate and easy to work with. So before I get started, I just want to point out that this is how I personally manage these projects and environments. It's definitely not the only way to do this, and I'm not claiming it's the absolute best way to do this, but it's something that has worked well for me up until this point. So I figured I'd walk through how I do this, and maybe it'll give you some ideas for how you can manage your projects. But if you don't like this workflow, then like I said, there are plenty of other ways that you can accomplish this same thing, so you have plenty of options. Now, also, I will be going over how I do this on my Mac, and I apologize if you're on a Windows machine. Some of these steps will be similar on Windows, but it's likely that a lot of this will be pretty different. But I will leave a link to the page where I got a lot of these ideas for this workflow, and I believe that they list the equivalent Windows commands on that website. So I'll leave a link to that page in the description section below. And with that said, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so first of all, I personally do a lot of work with data science libraries and packages, so I use the Anaconda distribution and the Conda package manager. Now, if you don't know what Anaconda is, it's basically an open source Python distribution that makes it easy to get up and running with different libraries and packages, and it comes with its own package manager called Conda. Now, Conda is similar to pip, but certain things can be more easily installed through Conda. Now, Conda isn't necessarily a replacement for pip, so you can use them both interchangeably. Personally, I actually use pip about 99% of the time, and if there's something not available through pip, then I will install it through Conda. Now, Conda can also manage virtual environments, and that is what I use in my projects. So we'll see that in just a bit. So I do have a separate video on installing Anaconda and the basics of using Conda, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description section below. Now, I know that some people don't like Anaconda for some reason, but I've never really understood why that is. But like I said, this is just how I personally do things and my work from day to day. Okay, so from this point on, I'm just going to create a new project from scratch, and we'll walk through the process of making sure that it is separate from our other projects. So I'll go ahead and create a new project here called My Project, and we'll create an empty directory just called my_project, and then we will cd into that directory. Okay, so now I'm going to create my virtual environment using Conda. So we need to figure out what version of Python and also what packages we'd like to use in this project. So for example, let's say that we wanted to create a project using the latest version of Python and the packages, let's say Flask, SQL Alchemy, NumPy, and Pandas. So to do this, we can say conda create to create a new virtual environment. And we want this name to be, since I called this my project, we'll call this my project_env. And now we can pass in our starting dependencies. So like I said, we'll do Flask, SQL Alchemy, also NumPy and Pandas. So then it's going to list all the dependencies for all those packages. And if we want to proceed, and we can just hit yes. Okay, so once that's finished up, it says here that we can activate this environment using this source activate command here. And to deactivate, we can do source deactivate. So I'm going to go ahead and clear my screen and activate this environment. And once you have the environment activated, it should add this to your prompt here in some parentheses, saying so that you know that you're within your virtual environment. So now that we're within our virtual environment, if I do a pip list, then we can see the packages that we installed. And with the environment activated, you can continue to add or remove any packages that you want. But when you get to the point where you have everything that you need, I like to create an environment.yaml file that captures everything about our environment and can be used to build the same environment from scratch. So let me go ahead and do this so that you can see what it looks like. So I'll clear my screen, and now to export this environment, we can say conda env export, and we want to export this to an environment.yaml file. Now, some people just use YML and some people use YAML spelled out. Either way should work fine. So once that environment file is created, let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So you can either open it up or in a text editor, or you can just display it here within the terminal. So on Mac or Linux, I'm just going to display it on the terminal by catting that file. So we can see that within this file here, if I scroll down, that it has the name of our environment and all of the dependencies with the exact version. So someone else could grab this file and create the exact environment with just one command. So now that we've seen what this environment file looks like, I'm going to clear my screen. So we could actually package up that environment.yaml file with our project, and then if someone wanted to replicate that environment, all they would need to do is create their own project directory, drop in that file, and then they could do a conda env create, and then they could just create with a -f saying that they want to create from a file and then pass in that file. Now, I'm not going to run this now since we already have that environment created, but you can see how easy it would be to create that environment from scratch just using that file. Okay, so now let's look at how we can manage our environment variables. Now, environment variables are used in many different projects to, set database URLs or hold secret keys or set a Python path and all kinds of different information. So the environment variables allow us to access sensitive data without putting it directly in our project's code for everyone to see. Now, some people just use global environment variables that they share amongst all different projects, and that can work, but then you have to be careful with naming and making sure that they're not overriding each other. So to separate these out, the conda environments come with some useful scripts that you can create. So to create these scripts, we need to put them in a specific location. So we need to navigate to where our environment is located on the file system. And to do this, we need to first find out where our environment is located. And to find that location, we can say conda env list. And this is going to list out all of the environments currently on my machine. And we can see that this one is the one that we just created, this my project env. Now this is the location of this environment, of this virtual environment. So now I'm going to change directory to the location of that virtual environment. And now that we're within our virtual environment directory, we're going to create two different directory trees so that we can set environment variables. Now, this is going to seem a little weird, but I'll put a link to the instructions in the description section below. Now, first we're going to create an activate directory, and this is going to hold scripts that will run whenever our environment is activated. So to create this directory, we'll say make dir-p, that means that the directory doesn't have to currently exist, and we're going to say etc conda, and this is going to be called activate.d, and now we're going to create a deactivate directory, which is just the exact same, except instead of activate.d, it's deactivate.d. Okay, so now we have created this activate directory and this deactivate directory. Now within the activate directory, we're going to create a file. So I'll do a touch, and then within that directory, we're going to call this env_vars.sh, and then we're going to create that exact same file in the deactivate directory also. Okay, so now we can create the environment variables that we want to set within the activate script and then unset those environment variables within the deactivate script. So let's edit these files and add some variables. Now you can edit those files in any text editor, but I'm going to use my Sublime text editor to open up that directory that we just created. So I am here in my virtual environment directory, and we created this etc conda, and here's our activate directory and our deactivate. So I'm going to open up this activate env vars and this deactivate env vars. Now within the activate script, let's create a fake database URI environment variable. So at the top, I'm going to specify that this is a bash script by saying bin-sh, and then underneath here, I'll do an export of database_URI and set that equal to. Okay, so this is kind of actually I think this should be PostgreSQL. I'm not entirely sure if that's the right connection string. But anyways, this is just a fake connection string to a test database here. So this is something that you would use an environment variable for, is something like a connection to a database with the username and password here, so that you don't have to have the username and password actually within your project's code. So whenever we activate our environment, our virtual environment, then it's going to set this database URI. Now within our deactivate script, let's go ahead and unset this variable. So again, we'll specify that this is a bash script with bin-sh, and then we will unset that database URI. Okay, so once I have both of those files saved, I'm going to quit out of our text editor here. And now let me deactivate and reactivate our environment to see if those set properly. So to deactivate this environment, I can just say source deactivate, and you can see that now our virtual environment has been deactivated. And now if I reactivate that with source activate, and that was called my_project_env. And now let's echo out that database URI just to see if that was activated, or see if this was set whenever we activated our virtual environment. So that is database URI. And you can see there that that environment variable was set when we activated our virtual environment. So now if I deactivate this virtual environment, say source deactivate, now if I try to echo out this database URI, then you can see that now that doesn't exist because we unset that whenever we deactivated our virtual environment. Okay, so far we have our Python version, our dependencies, and the environment variables all separated out. So for example, I have another test project here that I've created in my projects directory called CoreyMS_web. So let me navigate to that project really quick, and that is CoreyMS_web. And now let's look at the files I have available in here. Oh, and actually I'm in the wrong location. This is the virtual environment directory. I really want to be in my projects directory, CoreyMS_web. So now if we look at the files that we have in here, then we can see that we have an environment.yaml file in here. So let's take a quick look at that. So we've got a simple environment.yaml file here where we can see that the name of this virtual environment is CoreyMS_web. And in our dependencies, one thing to note here is that we're using Python 2.7 instead of Python 3. So you can have different versions of Python between different environments. And we can see that the environment is using the same dependencies that we listed before, except we're also including a SciPy down here at the bottom. Now, I've already created this environment from this YAML file, so let's navigate to the location of this virtual environment and see if any variables are being set. So to do that, we can say conda env list, just like we did before, and we can see it lists out all of our virtual environments here. So I want to navigate to this virtual environment folder, so I will cd to that directory. And now let's open this up in a text editor so that we can see if we have any activate and deactivate scripts within here. So I do have an activate script and a deactivate script, and it's another database URI. So this is basically the same thing that we had before, except here at the end, instead of testDB, we're using a different database, this CoreyMS database. So that's why it's beneficial to keep these environments separate. So when we activate our other project, it will set that environment variable to its database. And when we deactivate and activate our CoreyMS project, it will correctly set the database to this database. So let's activate this CoreyMS environment really quick. So if I close out of my text editor and we activate this with source activate CoreyMS_web, and then we echo out that database URI, then we can see that our database URI now has that correct database for that project. And also, if we check our version of Python, so I'll run Python here, you can see that this is using Python 2.7 for this project. So we're able to switch between versions of Python as well, which is extremely beneficial for different projects. Okay, so we're almost finished up. Now, for most people, you could stop here and you've got a great way of separating out your projects and environments from each other, but there's one more thing that I usually like to set up. So when you're working on multiple projects, sometimes it can be easy to forget to deactivate one project environment before working on another, or maybe you'll try to run tests and be wondering why all your tests are failing, only to realize that you haven't activated the virtual environment for that project and it's not seeing the correct dependencies and environment variables. Now, my personal preference is to have something in place that checks when you navigate to a project whether that project has an environment.yaml file and to activate that environment if it exists. Now, there are programs out there that will do something like this for you. So maybe you've heard of things like AutoEnv or DirEnv and tools like that. But for Conda, I just prefer to use my own function to do this. Now, I modified this function from some code that I found online, and I will put a link to the original function in the description section below so that they're sure to get credit. But basically, to do this, we need to write a bash function that checks for the virtual environment and automatically activates it if it finds one. And then we need to set an environment variable called prompt command that will run this custom function before each bash prompt. So let's open up my bash underscore profile file and we can see how we can create this function and environment variable. So I'm just going to open this up in Nano, and this is in my home directory, and it is the _bash profile. I'm sorry, that's .bash underscore profile. So if I scroll down here to the bottom, then we can see this function and this environment variable. Okay, so here's the function. It's called conda AutoEnv, and it checks if the environment.yaml file exists, and then it is grabbing the environment name from that environment.yaml file, and then it's checking if we're currently in that environment by checking this conda prefix environment variable. And then if we are not in our environment already, then it does a source activate on that environment name that it plucked from the environment.yaml file. And like I said, this is just a modified function that I grabbed offline, and I will post a link to that in the description below. Now, I have my prompt command environment variable here commented out where I'm exporting this because I didn't want the environments to be automatically activating during the video and you wondering what was going on. So now I can uncomment out this line, and then if we save this, so I'll do a Control X and a Y to save, and then I'll save that. Now, like I said, when I added that function to that prompt command variable, that will run that function before every prompt. It's just a special bash environment variable that does that. So now to make sure that that environment variable is set properly, I'm going to quit out of my terminal and then open this back up, and I'll make this text a little larger here. So now if we navigate to our project, so within projects, I'm navigating to this My Project directory. Now I expected that to activate automatically. Okay, it's because I misspelled environment here. So I'm going to rename this file. So I'm going to move that and spell this correctly. So that is environment.yaml, okay. Okay, and now you can see whenever I rename that to environment and spelled that correctly, then that virtual environment did get activated automatically. So we can see that we're in our My Project virtual environment right now. So now we should have access to those environment variables that get set when this is activated. And again, I'm spelling these wrong. Sorry about that. Okay, so now we can see that we are connected to our test database here, or we have that database environment variable set. So now if I navigate to my other project, which is called Corey MS Web, as soon as I navigate into there, then it sets that Corey MS Web environment variable. So now if we check that same database URI environment variable again, we can see that now it's set to that different database. So with that prompt command environment variable running that conda AutoEnv function, then we can see that the environment automatically gets activated. So it changes the Python that we're using, it's using the project's dependencies, and also it sets the environment variables just by navigating to the project folder that contains the environment.yaml file. So you don't need to deactivate the other project that you're working on or anything like that beforehand. So I like this feature because it keeps you from needing to remember to switch back and forth between the correct environments, or even needing to remember the name of your environments since they are in the environment.yaml file. It just does everything for you automatically. Okay, so I think that is going to do it for this video. I hope that this gave you some good ideas for how you can juggle multiple projects, even if you're working on projects with different Python versions or different Python packages and a lot of different environment variables, it should be easy to keep everything separate using a strategy like this. Now, like I said, this is how I personally do this, but even if you aren't using Anaconda or the Conda environments, then you can still do something like this using virtual env and tools like auto env. So definitely see what's easiest for you to put together and see if you can get a similar workflow, because most likely you'll need to learn how to handle multiple projects at some point in your career. So if anyone has any questions about what we covered in this video, then feel free to ask in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you have a preferred method for how you do this, then I'd love to hear about that also. Now, if you enjoy these tutorials and would like to support them, then there are several ways you can do that. The easiest way is to simply like the video and give it a thumbs up. And also, it's a huge help to share these videos with anyone who you think would find them useful. And if you have the means, you can contribute through Patreon, and there's a link to that page in the description section below. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thank you all for watching.